This is the Parent Portal Show.
You've seen prices rise from the dinner table to the pump, but Allstate agents are seeing ways to save you money on insurance. From starting a new policy to bundling coverage or even driving safely, Allstate agents know how to maximize your savings. They'll share their knowledge as they help you personalize your coverage. Because when it comes to seeing all the ways to save, Allstate agents do it best.
Mike Hammer has over 35 years as an Austin area Allstate agent. Call 512-343-6994 or visit mikehammer@allstate.com.
Savings vary, subject to terms, conditions, and availability. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates, Northbrook, Illinois.
Good morning. Welcome to the Parent Portal Show. With me today is my co-host, James Gumbert, and we're here for an exciting day, Coach, to talk about community and talk about what NIL is all about. And I think we have some pretty exciting topics to cover today. I think we're going to be talking a little bit about research, some of the things that I think parents are going to need to do the research. We're going to talk about reaching out. We're going to talk about asking for the right questions and who do you need to ask. And then we'll just get into a little bit about some stories and things that we think are relevant. And we'll start with some news. I think we've always liked to kind of cover what's going on in the headlines.
Yeah, well, thank you, and good morning to you, Stephen. And it's exciting to be back for our second show here. And some of the things that have happened since our last one are just amazing. This world of NIL is ever changing and ever growing. It feels like, I wanted to say by the week, but it's by the day sometimes and by the hour. A couple of the headlines that we've had this week really revolve around the March Madness.
Sure.
And we touched on this a little bit last week, but 3 of the 4 teams, if not all 4 teams, have all been working with the catch term collectives.
Right.
And those collectives have seen an increase in funding for NIL deals for not just the athletes, but for the school, have been exponential in the past week. And, you stop and you think about it, it's like it's the brands of these athletes, these schools, because of their performance, has put them in this place where they're out there making money.
So, Coach, let's talk about what is a collective. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's, from what we've been able to determine is collectives are, you can call them a lot of different things, but they're a group of fans, friends, families, corporations that have come together to be able to put money together to be able to put towards these athletes, schools, if you will, and that's where they're getting their funding from.
Sounds like a lot of alums coming together to help fund some things that the school wants to do.
They really are, and just a snapshot is like FAU, which is in the Final Four, has a billionaire that is one of their major alumni, and he has just got behind this. And FAU, who 2 years ago didn't even have a collective.
Yep.
Now they have a collective and a Final Four, and so you can see how the two are going hand in hand.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting because I'd love to say that there is no room for any kind of exposure to foul play or problems there. But I'm going to guess that 2 or 3 years from now, we're going to start to hear some of the challenges that, the NCAA has just kind of not been able to identify all the rules yet. So hopefully, as we keep moving forward, it's part of the reason the community is so important. Some of those rules and guidelines will get put in place.
You bet. And it's, like I said, it's ever changing. So that's the reason why this is such an important thing for our community, is so that parents have the right information.
So let's talk about some examples. I think there's a set of twins that you had mentioned.
Yeah, the Cavender twins out of Miami are basketball athletes that play for the University of Miami. Again, another program that was not in anybody's zip code, until the NIL money came in. And they have just inked a deal with an AI company to be able to, be their representation out there on on the basketball court and in the community. And it's we talked about this last week, where the fastest growing population in NIL deals are female athletes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exciting. That means that there is going to be some diversity with the money, and it will get spread around a little bit, and that's good to hear.
It really is, because when I first started doing research into this, it was primary football, right?
Yeah.
Everybody kind of, if you're in Texas and you're playing football, it's your life. And the more that we've gotten into this, the more we see not just football, we see basketball, we see track and field, we see so many opportunities, not just associated with one sport. And that's exciting as a dad, a parent. I'm sitting here looking and saying, hey, there might be an opportunity not just for my son, but maybe my daughter.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, a little closer to home in the basketball world, what about this Trey Johnson visit that we saw this last week?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, because Texas is been recruiting him, and he played this weekend at the All-American McDonald's Classic,
Right.
and was just a huge standout. And as a result, he's got that, he's got people calling him, wanting to be associated with him. He's a 5-star. I mean, Coach Terry, he was up there. I think day one of his new job, he was the first visit that he wanted to go see it. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that builds that buzz, that builds that brand.
Sure, right. Well, he's not going to be quite in the stratosphere as Bronny James, but
no, I mean, and it's interesting you bring up Bronny James. He moved up to the number one projected NIL moneymaker this week, and they're saying upwards of over $7 million a year.
wow.
That's just, it's hard to put your mind around that, and it leads to one of our other topics that we were kind of looking at this year is finances, and then accounting and taxes that go along with this.
Right.
It is a big deal, because a lot of people don't realize until it's on top of you. You got somebody that comes courting you in the middle of the spring of this year, and then you're able to sign a deal with somebody, and you don't realize that anything over $400 you have to report.
Yeah.
And if it's over $600, you're going to be in that space where they have to send you a 1099, but $400 or less, they don't. But you have to report it. That includes stuff like gifts. Like if you're fortunate enough to get a deal with, like a Sports Energy, and they provide you product, in the eyes of the IRS, that's income.
Sure.
And so they all of these different things are part of that conversation in our community.
Yeah.
And how do we, as good parents, surround ourselves with the right people to get us to that space of taking care of our kids?
Yeah, and so that's the challenge, right? You and I both know that there's not too many 17, 18-year-olds that are worried about their taxes or thinking about QuickBooks and what they need to set up to track a lot of that information. But it is going to get reported, because the professionals will spend the time to make sure that it's done correctly. There's already enough gray areas and problems with what the rules are, but the professionals are going to make sure that they abide by the tax rules. So that's an area that you can get yourself in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, and I think this will be an area that we can expand upon moving forward in future conversations. But it was just eye-opening, as I'm sitting here looking at this as, like I said, a dad, a parent, even a coach, and then going, wow, you're so caught up in all the other stuff that you may not see this until it's on top of you.
Yeah. Well, so this week we had a lot of fun with, it's track here in Austin, and we've been to a lot of track meets lately, and I have a kind of a wonderful story there that I had a chance to meet a dad whose son, he shared a little bit of his story while we were helping out with the track meet, and he told me about his son. He's got 3 boys. I have 3 boys. And he shared with me the story about his oldest son going off to LSU. And it was a little bit of a surprise for him. found out that last minute the kid was able to make the LSU football team, but they brought him in as a deep snapper and had a position for him. And immediately upon signing with the team, he had a $3,000 NIL solution waiting for him.
And where did that money come from?
From the collectives.
From the collectives.
Yeah. So there you go. It's already, that's a perfect example of what we're talking about.
And to that point, there is, the collectives have gotten onto this. It's in a team kind of environment. It's not necessarily the one, but it's the sum, right?
Sure.
And, where you may have a standout on an offensive line, you may have a great left guard, right? You may not have that same recognition on a right guard.
Yeah.
And so what they're looking at is saying, hey, we need to take care of that. And how do we take care of that? It's like we get NIL deals for the entire line.
Yep.
There's a piece of that pie for everybody. And the collectives have caught on to that, and they not only supply that, but they, that's one of their selling points. They go to these, these linemen, they go to these team members and say, you're part of this team. This is, before you go sign anything else, you're automatically, by coming to this school, going to get this.
All right, welcome back. Well, Coach, we started with this discussion about a parent that I had a chance to visit with a little bit. His son's gone off to LSU. Deep snappers are becoming very, very high commodity in the NFL, and go figure, now NCAA football teams are starting to really pay attention to that, because if there is something that is going to make or break a game, that position, that deep snapper, can really make a difference.
Yeah, well, you think in football there's three phases to the game, right? There's offense, defense, and people look past that, special teams, right? And everything from the snapper to the holder to a lot of people say that the punters and the kickers get all the glory in that moment, but literally the first person that touches that ball is the snapper, and it can be a very overlooked position, but it's one of those positions that if you don't have a good one, it is so apparent. It could be the difference in winning and losing a game.
Well, hopefully that's a interesting new trend that some of the parents and the kids, athletes that are listening to our podcast can appreciate and certainly be encouraged by the opportunity to become a specialty kick or a punter or a specialty deep snapper if that's something that they want to do. The kid that I'm talking about is off at LSU, but his of the three boys, Drew Davis is the son who's actually playing at a local high school team, Westwood, and then the younger child, the younger athlete, was there at the track meet. Fortunately, we might have a chance to have him on the show in the near future, and we'll do an interview with those parents to kind of hear more about their story and what they've been involved in. So I think what we'd like to do is get back into a conversation about just a little more about that community, Coach, talking about what that looks like and what we would hope that parents would start to appreciate. When we come to a team, you've talked about one of the most important things that you look at is athlete first, community second, and or team second. And to me, that's a kind of an interesting phrase. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, for me, and we talk about community a lot. I refer to my communities oftentimes as families because that's who you're spending all your time with. Yep. That's who you're building your relationships with. And so when I come into a community, I usually come from the place of, I'm bringing my kiddo with me. Mm-hmm. And so, it's like my kiddo's expressed an interest in playing football, basketball, track, whatever it is, they've expressed that interest. And so I'm investing first in my kid.
Sure.
That as parents, that's our first charge, and so being able to say, what is your interest? Let's expand upon that, and whether they do it for fun, whether they do it for competition is irrelevant. Is like they're wanting to be out there being active. and as a parent, I want to be active in their world. And so I take that granular part of it and say, my kids are first.
Sure.
But when I introduce them into a sports community, a team, if you will, then it becomes about that team and how my kiddo fits in that team. And when I start looking at this, I see this a lot. On the highest level, all the way down to the new kid on
Sure.
the block. I see parents that come out and don't realize sometimes that they think that their kid is like, he's the best player on this team, right? He's the best player on this team.
Daddy ball.
Daddy ball, okay. And it can be mom ball. I've seen it the same way with
mommy ball.
Yeah. But the other part that happens is that they don't realize, especially in sports teams, they need the rest of that team to be able to be a part of that community.
Yeah.
And you can't just exclude that. And so from that, what we often try to do in building that community is to bring everybody with us.
Sure.
The closer you build that culture, the closer you build your community, it helps because it helps not just on the field. Because we're trying to build good athletes, but we're doing a job as parents in trying to make good humans.
Yep.
And sport does such a great job of teaching us relationships, adversity, as well as how to excel, have confidence, consistency in your life that you can't get from very many other places. And in that moment, in building that community, that family, if you will, that's where you take the individual that you care about, you insert them, and if we can get them to all work together, man, so many things are possible, right?
Yep.
But one of the things that happens in relation to like what we're talking about in this subject is that it becomes a community of information.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So like when you have a question, I can think back to when I first came, to the 7th grade booster banquet, whatever you want to call it. It wasn't a banquet; it was a booster meeting, if you will. And I had no idea, first steps, first practices, best practices.
Sure.
And you were a grade ahead. Your kid was a grade ahead. Being able to say, "This is how you do it."
Yeah.
I mean, there was no YouTube that I could go look up. There was nothing like that. But to be able to have that community and get that resource, right? That's part of being a team, a family. You get to share that information.
What I hear you saying, Coach, what resonates with me is we're going to be our kids' greatest advocates. That's kind of our role. That's what we do as parents. And we're going to know our kids better than anyone else. We spend our lives with them. They spend their lives with us. And so we're going to know some of their strengths and weaknesses, and we should be able to be the people who are their greatest fans. And that's certainly a role that I cherish and enjoy all the time. But when you get beyond mom and dad, now you're looking for coaches, you're looking for parents that are there to support. And, we all have this story of being out on the baseball field. And, dad coach that I certainly was encouraging all the kids, but I was probably a little bit harder, or maybe I was just a little more intentional on my kid. But my kid didn't want to hear from me. He knew dad. He knew what dad was going to say. So I can't tell you the number of times that I said, you need to hit it this way. You need to run this way. You need to do this. And my kid would not listen. But Coach B, assistant coach, walks up and says, you need to do it this way. It's the commercial that we see right now. That's exactly what I just said. And that coach's way of saying it, or that other adult, makes an impact. And I love that role. I love that happens. I love that there are other people that I can team up with and be partners with to help my kids get better in that association. So, that's strong. And that's where that community really makes a difference in it. At least in a coaching level, that's a good example.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, you've heard the phrase before, it takes a village.
Absolutely.
It certainly does. And, in this moment that we're talking about our young men and women becoming, you know, athletes that are being recognized and for their value and their worth. And for that to happen, we've put them in that place, but we've also been able to surround them with good community
Yep.
that, not just makes our individual kid, but our team, our community, our family better.
Coach, it brings me to a story, if you'll allow me to go back to my Friday Night Lights in Odessa Permian. As a football player, and one of the things that you found out when you grew up in Odessa, Texas, is it didn't take long before parents knew who you were. It was a small enough, we were 100,000 people city at that point in time. And after a while, you just started knowing, and your path was covered with adults who knew who you were. And I remember very vividly the night I got pulled over by a police officer in Odessa, Texas, and I'm scared. I've just got my driver's license. I'm not sure what I did wrong. Sure enough, I was going a little too fast, and the police officer came up to me and said, let me see your driver's license, read it, and said, Stephen Nold, that seems familiar. And I, tried to play like I had no clue what he was talking about. Well, here I was thinking it was the football angle, which he did know me from that too. But his response was, I believe that your mother is the manager at the Permian Mall. And yes, sir, that is correct. My mom does do that. And he said, well, Mr. Nold, you were driving a little bit too fast. Where are you going? I told him I was headed right home, but he acknowledged that he was going to let me go with a warning, but he did want to see that I got home, and he said he would talk to my mom tomorrow to make sure that happened. That's community right there. And that association of adult energy and adult guidance, to me, is what we're talking about when we start talking about bringing community in and having those kind of conversations and encouragements and guidelines for the kids and athletes that we're working with.
It really is. And I mean, I think the catchphrase that people use now is culture, but it's the same thing. It really is in so many ways. I mean, to your point, small town Texas, you probably had that same guideline as many of us did growing up, where when the lights came on at night, that meant you were home.
Yep.
When the street lights came on, that meant it was time to come home. And if you weren't home, then every mom and dad between wherever you were and your house, had that responsibility, but also had that desire to make sure you were safe, you were okay, and make sure they let your folks know. And by the time you got home, you were under the watchful eye of not just your parents, but everybody in your community, right? Yeah. And it made a difference because everybody was in it to succeed. And I think that if you go back to a lot of these, these athletes that we talk about in these NIL deals, and we look at them in their community, it's not one, but the sum that surrounds them, that helps them in whatever way. It may be one little thing, but that thing makes the better person, better athlete, and, better for everyone in this world.
Well, James, I've been very blessed. I've had some great men mentors in my life, and there have been times when men, other than my father, have stepped in and said, Nold, you're doing it wrong, and I'm going to help you out here, son. And that has always been moments that have made a difference for me. I would also say that I have a role, and I recognize that role, and I look forward to intentionally touching young men as I reach out to them and say, son, let me give you some advice. And to do it in a way that's not scolding, but to give them another voice of assurance, of encouragement. I'm very fortunate to be a Boy Scout leader, so I've had the chance to really impact the lives of a lot of young men. And I think that's, again, part of this community culture that you and I are talking about. those are the ways that we can make a difference. We don't have to be the experts in how to throw the best fastball. We know where to, go find the coaches that can do that. But we do want to be both on and off the field, on and off the court, those positive influences that help these young women and men succeed in life. And that's where I think youth sports is very exciting, and that's that community aspect that we're talking about.
No, you're absolutely right. And as we move through our journey together in this this podcast, this parent portal, if you will, one of the things that we really want to make sure is that we bring everybody with us, because the monies that you see in this, there is enough to go around a lot of time all over this world. And so it's something that I think that we can help each other.
There's another story that I think we want to talk about a little bit, maybe more of a news brief. Let's talk a little bit about NIL and being in front of Congress this week.
Holy cow. Well, how did we get to NIL today, right?
Right.
And so we look back, it was really June 2019 that we looked at the first NIL kind of making its appearance, if you will, when Governor Newsom out in California, signed some legislation that said, we are going to allow athletes to have, the opportunity to make money off their name, image, and likeness.
Got tired of waiting on NCAA to do something.
Yeah,
didn't
it literally was like, they're going to take it into their own hands, and they opened the door. And from that, then it moved itself all the way over to 2020 and 2020 I believe it was September of that year.
Okay.
Down in Florida, Governor DeSantis said that, he took a page out of California's playbook and said, hey, we want to do the same thing. And from this,
the floodgates were starting to trickle, to break.
And then you look around and, a conglomerate of states said, hey, we need to get on board with this because we're going to be playing from behind.
Right.
And then finally in June of 2021, the NCAA, they couldn't stop it anymore, and they had to step up and do something.
Yeah.
But when they did that, what happened was, it became the Wild West because there was no guardrails. There was not a lot of anything. It was just basically, if you're an athlete, you have the ability to be able to go out and raise monies and sell yourself and, create that brand, if you will. And we've seen where that's taken us just in these 2 short years. I mean, athletes now are, on the stage and being able to be compensated for their value and worth. And so what has happened is like with no guardrails, the NCAA has really been taken out of the equation. And so we talked about it last week.
Yeah, Baker kind of threw his hands up a little bit.
Yeah, Baker said
Baker or Barkey? Barker.
Maybe Barker. Yeah, the
Barker.
former governor of Massachusetts.
There you go, Barker.
Charlie Barker.
Yep.
And forgive me. And Charlie Barker said, hey, we've got to get a hold of this. Right. And in less than a week, they were before Congress.
Right. So you had a chance to watch that a little bit, I understand.
Yeah, I watched some of the hearings that they were talking about. And basically what they're trying to do is rein it back in. And, I think the cat's out of the bag now. And, they are trying to be able to say, there needs to be a standard contract. There needs to be these standards that are in there. Well, basically, in this is an opinion, this is just as what is fact. They're trying to be able to control what they've already let go.
Yeah, I am pretty torn on that. I don't feel like government should be involved in that. I wish the NCAA had done a better job. Maybe this is the call to action that has kind of wakened the NCAA up and realized they do have a responsibility to serve the universities and the athletes, and maybe they can get that contract. And to me, the process, we talked about this last week. A contract is just a starting point, but it doesn't put enough of the guidelines in place and the rules. And the NCAA has really shrunk away from that responsibility that really should be on their shoulders. So hopefully that this is going to be a turning point that we'll start to see some changes in how this is all handled.
I think you're right, and this is obviously not the end all with them just going before Congress. I think this is first step, and I think that as the NCAA continues to try and be a stakeholder, a partner in this, you're going to see pushback from agents, athletes, families that are saying, "Hey, you're trying to take away something that we've been wanting forever," because this wasn't just an issue in the past 3 years. I mean, you had athletes that were, businesses, schools, universities were using these athletes not just for their performance on the field, but they were marketing off of them. And for me, there's anytime you're out there working for something, you're earning something.
Earning something. So what about that time that you were at the University of Texas and you had a chance to sit next to the Robinsons?
Yeah, actually, it's a very good question. We had gone to the Texas OU game, and we were sitting next to Bijan Robinson's grandparents.
Right.
And, we had no idea. We were just sitting there talking, and every time Bijan touched the ball, they went bananas, as every Longhorn did.
They should, right.
But we come to find out, that was their grandson out there. So we started a conversation, and it was amazing the things that they were able to share because, with NIL, the reason why you got the NIL deal to begin with was because you were a great something. Great
right.
football player, great basketball player, great lacrosse player.
Right.
And so that's the reason why you got it. Sure. And so, but when people come to you and they're coming to you and they're businesses,
yeah,
they're agents, they're lawyers, they're all these different things, and they already have a plan of what they are looking for and wanting to do. And so as a result of that, you have people that are really good athletes and really good parents, but not maybe very good business people. Yeah. Maybe not great lawyers, maybe not great accountants, and you need a team.
Yep.
Well, what we found out was Bijan's family was his team.
Right.
Bijan's sister was in charge of Bijan Incorporated. She was his marketing manager. And so he had already in that time frame between being a senior in high school probably.
Sure, right.
And being a senior at the University of Texas, learned how to be a performer on the biggest stage,
right?
But get out of the way and let somebody else be a performer for me to run my business of who I am, because you can't really do one without the other, in my opinion. If you're busy running the business of Bijan, then you're taking away from the time of being Bijan the athlete, which
yep.
is what got you there. Yep. And it was so revealing because up until that moment, I just looked at Bijan as a world-class running back. And in that moment, I realized that it was Bijan Enterprises.
Sure.
And so revealing as parents in our community, again, when we sit down and we start talking about it, how it's like whether your son, your daughter,
yep,
is Bijan or not, because we've talked about in the past, there aren't many Bijans out there.
Yeah, that's we're top 1%ers there.
Right,
we all know
right.
that's what we're talking about,
right? But
yeah.
like in our earlier headlines that we were talking about today, $400 is all you've got to make before like the business of paying taxes comes into play.
Yeah.
And so it's not just you make $3 million in an NIL contract, $400, and you've got the attention of the IRS.
Yeah.
And so being able to, as our kids start moving into that world, is being able to surround them with a good community of people
right.
that can represent us and allow, our kids to just go out and be performers. That's why it's so crucial.
Yeah. So we're talking about resources, right? So now we're talking about what are the resources when you're at the table with the professionals. What are the resources that parents need to have? And what are the resources that they're bringing to the table to have those expert conversations. We know that the tax issues are going to be there. The tax accountability is going to be there. We know that there are going to be brand discussions at some point in time. The Davis kid at LSU, the collective gave him $3,000 just 2-3 weeks ago. He got his first individual NIL deal, $300 a month. And boy, $300 a month as a college kid, oh my gosh, that would have done me a world of good when I was back at the University of Texas.
Right. And the other part of it is you talked about the people surrounding him is like, I don't know the first thing about having somebody read a contract in that athlete type of world is like, what am I signing here? And it's like, as a parent, I want to do best practices. The best practice is to put those people who know what's going on there for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so that we can give our kids the right advice, the right direction. And because you don't want to be in that situation 3 years removed where, how does what happened with the NCAA affect me 3 years down the road?
Right.
Well,
and again, we're talking about different stakeholders, and each stakeholder at that table is going to have their own interests at heart. And for parents to understand, look, coaches are great people, and the universities are great places to be a part of, to be to go to that university or that college that they're going to. But they have their own interests at heart, and we have to be aware that it's just a business transaction for everyone at that table except for the athlete, who is the product, and for the parent, who is the advocate. And if they are not considering that as a business transaction, if they are not thinking about it with the right resources and the right perspective as they come to that table, there are some real pitfalls and challenges that we can get into. And I know we've been talking a little bit about Lamar and his situation.
Yeah, we spoke our last episode about Lamar Jackson.
There's an update.
There is an update. So Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson both came out in the same class.
Right.
And so they were both at the zenith of that world when they were drafted.
Great quarterbacks.
Both played at the highest level.
Yep.
And very similar games. And, the product speaks for itself. I mean, both Baltimore and Buffalo are always considered to be, in the playoffs every year.
Franchise players.
Absolutely. And so the difference, that we're seeing right now is that Josh has surrounded himself with a community.
Right.
Of attorneys, marketing agents,
legal experts.
Yeah, everybody that you would run a business around surrounds him. And Lamar is representing himself.
Yeah.
And what we've seen is like the way that their deals are structured. Josh Allen is getting $43 million. And you look over at Lamar and they're saying, 23. And you're like, wait, they're both, fantastic athletes. Yeah. What is happening? And I think it's like you have gotten away from the part of being just an athlete and worrying about that.
Right.
And you're trying to get the most from your product.
Yeah.
But the hard part is like, you're not a professional agent. You're not a professional attorney, accountant. And when you're going into these situations and negotiating, you're coming from a place of where you don't have the knowledge and the wisdom to be able to go to them and say, hey, I am the same person as Josh Allen.
Yeah.
Right. And that's unfortunate. That's, yeah.
Coach, I've been a marketing professional for all my life. Right. And, people hire us and our company and hire me because of my marketing skills and knowledge. Right. So you put me in a room with a bunch of marketing people, I can probably hold my own ground. But, you want to ask me how to throw a fastball, I'm not the right guy.
That's it.
But I'm smart enough to know that there is a right guy that has a lot more knowledge than I do, and it's hiring the professionals, it's hiring the people who have that expertise that can be at the table with you.
I couldn't agree more with it. I mean, and it's not just in sport; it should be that way in life. I mean, I am not a doctor, but if something's wrong, I don't.
But you play one on
yeah,
TV.
I play one on TV. You know, I slept at Holiday Inn last
Had to
night.
get that in.
Yeah, but the hard part is like a lot of times we throw that out the window. You know,
Sure.
where when there's something wrong with our teeth, we go see a dentist. We don't try and work on them ourselves. But when we feel like we know something, when it's like, oh, I've got this kind of moment. That's when we need to check ourselves as parents and say, wait a minute, is it? And go to your community and say, hey, is this the right move? Because I mean, why wouldn't you do that?
Well, because we've all been DIY, right? It's been that mindset that we've started with. Heck, I look at my kid's foot and says, rub some dirt on it and you'll be okay. And we don't have to go see the medical doctor today. But there are times when we realize when the bone is sticking out, hey, maybe I'm not the right guy to go ahead and give that advice. And I think that's one of the challenges as parents is we're coming from a DIY, do-it-yourself mindset. We're helping our kids get to the next level. We're doing everything to try to help push them forward or get them forward. We occasionally bring the coaches in and let them be a part of it. But then we've got to start recognizing there's a transition period going on. There's going to be that time as our community supports us, as our parents support us, that we've got to start bringing the correct professionals in.
Right. Well, that's the whole purpose of the Parent Portal.
Yep.
Is like not just teaching, but also surrounding and saying these are best practices. Not because it's something that we dreamed up. It's because we've tried and failed.
Yep.
We've tried and succeeded, but more than anything else, we've been there already. And you want to bring everybody along on your journey. And for us, that to me, I mean, the Parent Portal speaks to that so well because I was uneducated, and now I feel like, holy cow, you're just blown away by the amount of information that's out there. And, geez, how does this affect my most important resource? And that's my kids.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's your call to action, right? Go find your community. Go do the research. Make sure that you are locating those parents. Make sure you are reaching out, asking for the advice, asking for that input, and make sure that you are going down a path that others are going down also. You don't want to be out in those weeds. It's not going to do you any good to try to go blaze a new path. There are plenty of parents that have gone down this path before, and even with NIL, there's good advice. And we're going to get into that in our next episode. We're absolutely going to bring in some of those voices within the community and give a chance for those parents to tell us some of the perils and pitfalls that they've gone through.
Yeah, I mean, it's you said it all perfectly. I mean, end of day, we're learning too, and man, what we learn is both a little anxious at times,
right?
Because it's so changing, but it's exciting. These are great opportunities for our kids to be able to have another thing in their life that's going to help them succeed, not just individually, but as a community. And man, as a parent, that's my first love now.
Great. We got a great week in front of us. We should have fun, be safe, and reach out and bring a kid into the community.
I think that's great words because, I mean, springtime, Texas, for us is like an opportunity for our kids to it doesn't snow much here, but you see more kids out and you see them in the community and, is bringing them into our worlds and being a part of their worlds and helping us all grow together.
Great week ahead of us. I know we're going to have some great interviews at our next episode. Looking forward to that with some of the local parents. In the meanwhile, play fair, play hard, and have fun. This is the Parent Portal Show.